I live in a small town in northern Maine, tucked between thick pine forests and long stretches of dirt road that seem to go nowhere. There's not much here besides the diner, the gas station, and the feeling that you're too far from anything to feel safe. I've always liked that, though, the isolation. It's quiet. Peaceful. At least, that's what I thought before the camcorder. It was early October, the kind of cold where the wind feels like it's slicing through your jacket. I was hiking alone, which wasn't unusual for me. I'd grown up with these woods practically as my backyard. My parents had a small cabin nearby, but they moved to Portland years ago, leaving it to me. On weekends, I'd drive up from town, spend a night or two, and just clear my head. The forest always had a calming rhythm: the crunch of leaves, the faraway cry of crows, the distant sound of water trickling over rocks. That day, though, something felt off. I can't explain it exactly. Maybe it was the silence. Usually, you can hear animals scurrying, birds chattering, branches creaking. But that morning, it was like the entire forest was holding its breath. I was about 2 miles deep when I saw it, a glint of something metallic poking through a pile of leaves beside a fallen log. At first, I thought it was just trash. But when I brushed the leaves aside, I realized it was an old camcorder, a black Sony Handycam, the kind people used in the early 2000s. It was scratched, dirty, but intact. Here's the weird part: the little red light on the side was still blinking. At first, I thought maybe it was just a reflection. But no, the light was on. The battery still had juice. Which didn't make sense, because this thing looked like it had been lying there for years. I picked it up, and when I pressed a button, the small screen flipped open, revealing a shaky view of the forest around me. It was still recording. I froze. Someone had left this here. Recently. I looked around, half expecting to see someone watching me from the trees. Nothing. Just silence. My hands were shaking as I hit the playback button. The screen flickered, and a video started playing. The timestamp said October 2nd, 5:43 p.m. That was yesterday. The footage showed the forest, the same area from roughly the same angle I was standing in. The person behind the camera was breathing heavily, moving quickly, like they were trying to stay quiet but were panicking. The video shook violently as they turned in circles, pointing the camera toward the trees. Then they whispered something. I turned the volume up, straining to hear. If you find this, don't. The rest was muffled. The camera jerked violently as if the person was running. I caught a glimpse of a figure, blurry, humanoid, darting between the trees. It was tall, pale, and moved in these jerky, unnatural motions. Then, the camera fell to the ground, pointing up at the sky through the canopy. I could hear heavy footsteps, then a wet, choking sound. After that, nothing but static. The video ended there. I remember standing there, staring at the little screen for what felt like forever. My heart was hammering in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to run back to my car. But curiosity won. I replayed it again, trying to see more detail, maybe a face, maybe some clue. But that pale shape, whatever it was, looked too distorted to be human. I decided to take the camcorder back to my cabin. Maybe I could hook it to my laptop, check the files properly. That was my first mistake. The sun was dipping low by the time I got back. My cabin isn't fancy, just one room, a cot, a wood stove, and a small desk. I connected the camera and transferred the videos. There were 6 files total, all dated within the last 3 days. The first 5 were normal enough: a guy talking about camping, setting up his tent, cooking by a fire. He looked mid-30s, scruffy beard, plaid jacket. His voice was calm. Name's Trevor, he said in one clip. Trying to get away from town for a few days. No cell service here, but that's kind of the point, right? I remember pausing, thinking, Trevor who? There hadn't been any missing person reports lately, at least none I'd heard of. In the later videos, though, his tone changed. By the 5th clip, he looked scared, eyes wide, whispering into the camera. Something's been following me, he said. I can hear it at night. Thought it was a bear, but it moves wrong. Fast. Keeps getting closer. The 6th and final clip was the one I'd already seen in the woods. The timestamp matched exactly. I sat there for a long time after the last video ended. I should have called someone, the police, a ranger, anyone. But I didn't. Part of me didn't even know what to tell them. Hey, I found a camera in the woods and there's some guy being hunted by something. They'd think I was crazy. So instead, I decided I'd look for him myself in the morning. That night, I barely slept. The wind outside the cabin sounded different, like footsteps crunching through leaves. At one point, I thought I heard whispering right outside my window, but when I looked, there was nothing there. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it was my imagination. I grabbed my flashlight, knife, and camera, then followed the GPS coordinates embedded in the video file metadata they showed where the clips were recorded. The location was only a mile deeper into the forest. The trail narrowed the farther I went, branches clawing at my sleeves. After about 30 minutes, I came to a clearing. There, half buried under leaves and dirt, was a tent torn open, everything scattered. I found a backpack, a can of beans, and a small journal inside a Ziploc bag. The first few pages were normal notes about hikes, weather, meals. Then, the handwriting turned frantic. It's watching me. Always behind me. I can see it between the trees. It knows I have the camera. No animals. No birds. It's just, waiting. If anyone finds this, don't look for me. It wants you to look. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. The last entry was just one line, scribbled so hard the pen nearly tore through the paper. It's in the reflection. At first, I didn't understand what that meant until I looked down. My camcorder's screen had flipped open, showing the live feed. And behind me in the reflection was something standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall. Pale. Head tilted. Watching me. When I spun around, there was nothing there. I ran. I didn't stop running until I saw the roof of my cabin through the trees. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like jelly. Every branch that cracked behind me made me whip around, certain that thing, whatever it was following. I slammed the cabin door shut and shoved a chair under the handle. The place felt smaller now, claustrophobic. My hands were still trembling as I set the camcorder down on the desk, screen flipped open. Nothing appeared on the feed now. Just the cabin interior, me panting like a maniac. I told myself it was a trick of light, that what I saw in the reflection was a tree or a shadow. But the rational part of my brain was losing ground fast. Because the forest had been too quiet, and that feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. I started a fire, just to hear something besides my heartbeat. Flames always made me feel safer. It was the only thing I could control. Around 6 p.m., I finally convinced myself to watch the footage from that morning. I connected the camera again, pressed play, and scrubbed through. There near the end, right before I ran, the reflection in the camcorder's screen wasn't subtle. You could clearly see a figure standing behind me in the distance, between two trees. It wasn't human. It was pale, almost bone white, with long limbs too long. Its head was slightly too large, face stretched and blank, like a wax mask. It didn't move, but the image shimmered, almost like static. The instant I paused the video, a loud knock hit my window. I jumped out of my chair. 3 sharp knocks. Then silence. The curtains fluttered slightly from the cold breeze that came through the gaps. I didn't move for what felt like minutes. Then I grabbed my flashlight and edged closer. Nothing. Just the empty clearing and the woods beyond. But as I turned off the flashlight, the reflection in the glass shifted again, something pale darting between the trees. I closed the curtains and sat with my back to the wall until the fire burned low. Around midnight, I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of static. The camcorder had turned itself on. The screen was flickering, showing live video of the cabin, but now there was a faint whisper coming through the speaker. At first, it sounded like wind. Then it started forming words. You saw me. I froze. The camera shifted slightly on the desk like someone had nudged it, and the view tilted toward the door. You shouldn't have looked. I lunged forward and slammed the lid shut, yanking out the battery. The whisper cut off instantly. The silence that followed was almost worse. I packed my stuff that night: laptop, flashlight, journal, everything, and decided to leave first thing in the morning. I'd call the cops once I had signal. I don't even remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, the cabin door was wide open. Footprints, bare, long, thin, led from the door to the middle of the room. And they stopped right beside my bed. I tore out of there. Didn't even grab half my gear. When I reached my car, the engine stuttered before starting, like it didn't want to go. As I drove down the dirt road, I saw something in the rearview mirror. Standing in the middle of the path behind me. That same pale shape. It wasn't moving. Just watching. I made it back to town by noon. Cell service returned, and I called the sheriff's department. I told them everything: the camcorder, the tent, the journal, the tracks, the figure. The deputy who showed up, a guy named Harris, gave me this skeptical look the whole time, but he still took me seriously enough to drive back up with a couple of rangers. When they returned later that evening, they told me the tent was gone. Not just packed up, gone. No trace. They found drag marks, though. Like something heavy had been pulled across the dirt. Harris told me to stay in town for the night while they looked further. I checked into a cheap motel near the diner. The entire time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me there. I kept the camcorder battery out, but the device still emitted a faint electric buzz. Like it was holding a charge that shouldn't exist. When I finally turned on the TV to distract myself, it took a second to register what I was seeing. The local news was reporting a missing person: Trevor Hale, age 34. Missing since October 2nd. Same guy from the footage. They showed a photo: plaid jacket, scruffy beard, same man I saw on the camera. The reporter mentioned that hikers had found unusual markings near the search site: long, claw-like grooves in the trees. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the clearing again. The trees were bending inward, closing around me. Something was whispering from behind every trunk, hundreds of voices murmuring at once. It's in the reflection, it's in the reflection. When I woke, the motel TV was on again, static filling the screen, and in the faint flicker, for just a moment, I saw a face staring back from the glass. Pale. Featureless. Still. I tried to throw the camcorder away the next day. Drove out to a dumpster behind a gas station and tossed it in. Drove off without looking back. 2 days later, I came home from work, and it was sitting on my doorstep. Wrapped neatly in a plastic bag. And the red light was blinking again. When I finally worked up the nerve to play it, the timestamp said live recording. It was showing my front door. From outside. I dropped it. The feed shook as the image panned slightly upward, and for a split second, I saw my own silhouette framed in the window. Then static. The camera powered down on its own. That's when I packed a bag and left town. I don't know how to explain what's been happening since. Every reflective surface, windows, mirrors, even my laptop screen sometimes flickers with that pale shimmer, like it's right there, waiting for me to see it again. I've covered my mirrors. I sleep with the lights on. But sometimes, at night, I still hear the click of a camcorder starting to record. And when I close my eyes, I can see the red light blinking in the dark.